And now our host, Stephen Lee Morris.
John Freedman grew up in Claremont, California. In 1989, he moved to Moscow, Russia, where he lived with his Russian wife for several decades. And during this time, he was the theater editor for the Moscow Times. John is here to explain the many reasons that he and his wife decided to leave Russia in 2018, and he joins us from Greece. John Freedman, welcome to Animal Farm.
Thank you. I just had to click got it. That's why I waited for it. Here I am. I'm with you.
John, you're joining us from the island of Crete, where you now lived. When I first met you in 1990 on my first visit to Moscow, I had been invited to be a kind of playwright in residence after having produced a Russian theater company in Southern California. And when we met in Russia, we discovered that we were actually in the same high school at the same time and had never met, which is awfully odd. I mean, there's a small world, but when you're at the same high school in a place like Claremont, California, and you've never met, maybe the world is larger than we think.
Actually, that's an encouraging thing, isn't it?
I think so.
It's actually larger than we think.
Yeah.
I would like that to be the truth.
But so you had been when I got there in 1990, you had been there just a very short time. You had shown up in 1989, and you were living out in a suburb outside of Moscow at the time. And you started a long and distinguished tenure as the theater critic for the Moscow Times, which is an American-owned newspaper, which still exists, but like newspapers everywhere, they joined the bandwagon of largely curtailing their arts coverage. And you were
the only thing I would say it was Dutch-owned. The Moscow Times was Dutch-owned, not American.
Oh, it's Dutch-owned. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that correction. It was okay. We'll say it was Western. It was a Western-owned newspaper, and
it's now been forced out of Russia. The people that were left working there in recent time, they all had to literally get out almost overnight. There was, as things started to shut down in Moscow. They all had to, and so most of them are now working out of Riga or Vilnius. I'm not sure which, to be honest with you, because I haven't kept up with everybody at the paper. I left in 2015, but yes, the Moscow Times has pretty much gone the way of almost all newspapers.
Yeah. The reason you stayed, why would an American stay in Russia and in Moscow in particular, was that you married a Russian actress who had a distinguished film, theater, and television career. In fact, she was in the company that I had invited, and she played a prominent role in that play. It was called Dear Yelena Sergievna, and it performed at the Chicago International Theater Festival, and then on the bounce came to Cal State Dominguez Hills, and that's where I met your wife, OKSANA. Fast forward, and it is very fast, to around 2014, 2015, when Russia starts to seize Crimea, and things get very, very dicey, because your wife, OKSANA, was part of a protest movement against that invasion.
Right.
And
I'm just going to take you back, and I'm going to add one more step in there, maybe a step and a half, very briefly, and then let you get on with the timeline. I do want to say that throughout the 90s, OKSANA and I both felt extremely privileged and quite happy, actually, because Russia was a very rough country. It was a rough country with lots of problems, but there was this sense that it was an awakening, awakening thing. It was searching for itself. It was looking for itself. It was actually finding answers here and there, and it was exciting to be part of this huge country with this complex past that was really struggling with hard questions about itself throughout the 90s. And then in 2000, when Boris Yeltsin decided to quit and turned the country over to a KGB officer, believe me, that was more than a sign.
Mm-hmm.
That was the moment we saw the lid beginning to come down. It was still way up there, and it was still a long way for it to come down, but that's when the lid started to come down. And almost immediately, within months, Putin began outlawing television shows, entire television stations, and so the re-Sovietization of Russia actually began fairly quick. And then it moved more slowly until more or less kind of slowly throughout the first decade, and then we come to 2014, which is what you were just going to come to, and the revolution, the Maidan revolution in Kiev, which made Russia really angry.
So Oksana at that time, she is on the streets of Moscow. She is actually a spokesperson for protest. She's not just showing up.
Right.
She
was invited. The people like Boris Nemtsov and Alexei Navalny would call her up and ask her, "Would you please come? Host. We're going to have a rally, 30, 50,000 people in the center of Moscow, and would you agree to be the MC for the thing, or would you please come and speak? Or we are doing a series of video appeals against the war in Ukraine. Would you be willing to do a video thing, or would you be willing to put together video?" She put together lots of video marathons with famous people opposing the war. So she became very active very quickly in the anti-war community, and it's not just it's enough to just be against war, isn't it? But she was born in Ukraine. She was born in Ukraine. She's ethnically 3/4 Russian and 1/4 Ukrainian, but she was born in Ukraine and grew up there. So the notion of Russia waging war against the place that she was born and grew up in was insane.
Yeah.
And she couldn't accept it.
So what happened then after she's made these very public appearances? What happened? I mean, it's a two-pronged question. What happened in your personal life? I mean, in your domestic life, we'll say, in terms of your relationship with the government, and then what happened to her career?
Well, the government was quite prominent in our personal lives throughout the 90s. We always knew that they were there. I was called in to be interrogated many times. I was called into the KGB offices. They would, under strange pretenses, would invite me to hotels or restaurants where they would meet me. They stole our car. We're quite sure that it was the KGB that stole our car, and then they offered to get it back for us. They wanted to do us favors. They wanted to do us favors. You've had some troubles. We understand you've had some troubles lately, John. No troubles that I can think of. Well, but yes, you've had some, wasn't there a serious little thing that went wrong, last week? No, I can't think of anything well, but your car disappeared. Your car was, the car, yeah. Yeah, there were conversations like this, somewhat regularly,
Yeah.
in the 90s. After Putin became president, they stopped. And so it kind of went underground, if you will. I say underground in the sense that, we were not aware specifically of how much interest they did or did not have in us, except that I had to go in once a year to get renew permission to stay in Russia and get papers in order and everything. And they were always, very, very, they were sticklers about making sure that everything was, all the I's were dotted and all the T's were crossed and all of the things were signed. And it created a tremendous amount of problem for me, and they thoroughly enjoyed watching me have to struggle to get all of these pieces of paper, sometimes getting one Moscow housing organization to issue a paper that they don't issue because it's not in their power. But the people that I was talking to said I had to get a piece of paper from them saying that I had permission to stay in Russia. And then those people telling me, we can't give you that paper because we have no power to give any such paper. And so they, they watched me like having to, they just didn't, I'm sure it was a big, fun thing for them to watch me go through all of this stuff. But aside from that, we didn't have the sense of being followed. That would come back to us later. But after Putin was named, was essentially appointed president, we knew that things were not going to be good. And we went through, we watched, as I said, TV channels be closed down, TV programs be closed down, newspapers be closed down, other news organizations be closed down, little by little. And you could just feel it, laws coming into effect that it was against the law to question the official line of history.
Oh, this sounds painfully familiar.
Of World War II.
Yeah.
A law went in saying that it was illegal to question the official version of World War II. So if you were to say, I don't know, actually somebody did say it. Somebody did ask the question, was the Leningrad siege necessary? Could Russia have done, could the Soviet Union have done without having Leningrad held under siege for 900 days? They asked that question and they were, boom, the law was on them. They were in trouble. They were in court. They were accused of being, all kinds of, breaking this law that you can't question official version of history and everything. So that was all going on around us.
This is really a cautionary tale for the United States in its treatment of even the state of Texas currently is considering legislation to actually forbid certain books, actually book banning, but so it's a very similar authoritarian kind of parallel.
I will say that, I started seeing the United States look more and more like the old Soviet Union.
Yeah.
While Russia was in the 90s was trying to move away from it. I remember there was this law that Chicago or someplace in a major city in Illinois, I think it was Chicago. This was under the first Bush, that if somebody got beat up for opposing something that the U.S. government had done, I've forgotten what it was, whether it was, I don't remember what it was, but there was a law actually passed that you could beat a person up for questioning this law, that the U.S. had put into action, if you will. And I just thought, oh my God, Russia was moving away from that in the 90s, and the U.S. is going towards it.
Yes,
and I watched the U.S. go closer and closer and closer, and now now we're at a point where you have Fox News mouthing the Putin line and Trump mouthing the Putin line and the complete confusion of points of view and theories and philosophies. It's all turned into a jumble tumble that's upside down and inside out now. It's very, very, very strange to watch.
Yes.
And we've kind of gotten off on a tangent, but it's an important tangent for the United States, because yes, what I'm saying is I agree with you heartily, and I've seen this happening actually for over 20 years. I've seen it coming.
Yes. On my annual visits for about the better part of a decade, starting when Gorbachev was president and then concluding when Putin was president, the visits to Russia were one thing, and you could see an evolution there, but it was upon the return to the United States, it would be reframed from the experience in Russia. And I just concur completely that the sense was, oh my goodness, we're becoming more like them. Yeah. The two countries are really getting closer and closer together. I think that's really true. It's just nice to hear. I always thought that was sort of just a personal quirk, but it's nice to hear it verified from somebody else who's also observed the scene for decades.
Oh, absolutely. And this has been, this is a creeping authoritarianism that has been afoot for much longer in the US than people really want to believe. You know, people want to blame things on Trump. And I understand perfectly well why they want to do that. I blame a few things on myself. But Trump, of course, he's a symptom. I mean, he's a part of this, that growing. I mean, look at how the Republican Party just leapt at his authoritarianism when he brought it out. They just glommed onto it, and now they're holding on to it, just hanging on for dear life to it. It's astonishing.
Yep. So we're going to jump to 2016, which was you actually left in 2018. 2018,
we left for Greece. Yeah,
you left for Greece to live on Crete, but you said you really started to feel the pressure around 2016. You could see the boom coming down. Yeah.
I would say that started. Whether it's 2015 or 2016, it doesn't really matter. Roughly in that period, we could just see it. I mean, statues of Stalin were going up all over the country.
Oh, here we go.
I mean, I could name a whole bunch of things, but I mean, isn't that enough?
Yeah.
I will name one other. They outlawed obscenities in theaters and on films. Making the country sound incredibly infantile, because bandits, killing people or being killed had to say, "Oh gosh, that hurts," things like that were happening. And you can just, you just feel that the space is closing in further. And the conversations that I would have when I would go in to get my yearly renewal of my permission to live there in Moscow. We had this conversation once with this guy, and he said, John, and I love this actually. I used to quote this as a positive thing. Now I realize that it was like the beginning of the end. But John, do you think Nikolai Gogol will ever go out of style? Now I'm sitting here in a bureaucrat's office. This guy is probably semi-KGB agent. He's probably a partial or at least full KGB agent who is in charge of foreigners in Moscow. And I, as this, one that's been there for so long, he's up somewhere on the top. I'm somewhere on the top of his list. And he asks me, is Nikolai Gogol ever going to go out of style in Russia? And I'm thinking, God, is this great or what? I'm thinking, even this son of a bitch, he wants to have a conversation about the eternal qualities of Nikolai Gogol. But at the time, and I say at the time, I took it as this incredibly wonderful, quirky, but wonderful thing. And now, of course, I realized that was just another part where even that guy was thinking, God, this is getting weird. The Inspector General, Dead Souls, that stuff is starting to look more and more like the country I'm a part of. I'm, playing guys.
Yeah.
And so, it was still another sign that this, this stuff was closing in on us.
What happened to OKSANA's career?
Well, after she started openly opposing the war, and she started doing that virtually immediately, I mean, within weeks, protests arose in Moscow. And she was, at that point, she was, one of the top actors, top female actors in Russia. And she had like 7 or 8 different shows at 7 different theaters in Moscow. And she was usually making at least 3 or 4 films a year. She has all kinds of awards. I mean, that 10-year period when she was there, all the awards sitting up here to my right. And one by one, well, she would be invited to audition for a film, or they would call her and they'd say, no audition necessary. The director would call her. I wanted to work with you my whole life. you know, I've been waiting for this. This is the perfect role for you. It's just great. This film is going to be great. You don't even, you know, you don't even need to come in. We don't need to audition you. Or would you please come in and audition? You know, sometimes with audition, sometimes without. And in every case, Oksana would either, they would end up the phone call, you're in, you're my woman, you know, you're going to play this role. Or she would leave the audition and they would say, that was fabulous, it was wonderful, it's exactly what we want. You're in, we're going to start, you know, thus and such a date, blah, blah, blah. And then that was it. No more calls. We'd never hear. Or we might get a call a day or two before the shooting was to start and they'd say, Oksana, oh, this is really so hard to say, but unfortunately, the producer has decided that another actress is going to play this role. Of course, the producer does have that power. In fact, in Russia, the producer does have that power. The directors have very little say in who is going to be in their films. But this was not a. It was no. There was no question as to what was happening. It was that she was on the wrong side of the lines, if you will. And they would try. They tried for a long time. Channel 1, Russian Channel 1, is an odious channel. It's like Fox News times 10. It's just a brutal, lying, scheming propaganda factory. And they were constantly calling Oksana and inviting her to be the host of a new game show, or to come in to, you know, take part in talk shows. And she would, I used to get the biggest kick out of it. I'd sit there and I'd listen to him. And she would, instead of, you know, saying, you know, no, I'm not interested or whatever, she would then start to try to convince the person calling her to quit their job. She would say, now, do you realize who you're calling from? You called me up today and you asked me this question. Do you know who you work for? Oh, yeah, I know who I work for. Yeah, but do you know what the place that you work for? Do you know what they stand for? Do you realize that they are telling lies to people on the news? And meanwhile, people are dying in Kiev and in Ukraine. And she said, you don't really want to have anything to do with that, do you? She tried to get people to quit their jobs whenever they would call her. I mean, it was hilarious. I mean, it was incredibly heroic, but it was also totally futile and very funny. So anyway, her career virtually around that time really came to a halt. I don't know how, but 1 or 2 films after that, she did get to make, you know, small parts somewhere, but it came to an end. And I mean, there's no
for question. No other apparent reason.
Well, I will, let me put this. The last time I had to get yearly permission to stay in Russia, and then I had to get my overall residence papers every 4 or 5 years renewed. So there was this whole thing I had to go through. So when we went to get my last residence papers renewed, and that would have been 2014, by the way. That would have been 2014. They held off, and they did not issue, they would not answer my calls, they wouldn't answer the stuff I sent them, my applications. And we, like at the place where I was working at the time, the Moscow Times, they said, John, if you don't have this official paper by Thursday this week, we're going to have to fire you, because we don't have the right to employ you if you don't have this document from the government, the Russian government. So we got one of our friends from the police department. This is a long story. She lived across the hall from us, and she was a police officer. She liked us, so she would help us. So we would say, you know, we're not getting through, and I have to have these papers. Can you tell us what to do? And she says, give me 10 minutes, I'll come back and I'll let you know. She comes back and she says, okay, guys, on Wednesday at 8 o'clock, there's an office out in the boonies. You go out to that office. there's a woman by the name of, and I don't remember her name, of course, but she's the woman in charge of everything. She will be expecting you at 8 o'clock. Do not arrive at 8:05. When she arrives at 8 o'clock, she's going to receive you and she'll take care of it. So, you know, it's kind of clandestine and weird and everything, but you know, that's how things go there. So, you know, we're used to it. It's a pain, but okay. Got in the car, got out there. We got out there at like 7:50. We sat in the car for about 5 minutes, and then about 5 minutes of 8, we walked into the building. We had been told that she would come in through the front door and head up the stairs, and that the only person that would do that at 8 a.m. was the woman we wanted. So we positioned ourselves at the stairs. And when this woman, indeed, first time we'd ever seen her, she comes in, she heads for the stairs, and she looks at us, and she clearly knows who we are. Of course, OKSANA would be known because she's a well-known actor, but who's going to know me? She clearly knew who we were. And she said, "Come on up, folks. We've got some work to do." So, oh, this is nice, and big smile on her face. We go into her office. Her office is the size of our apartment here, you know, huge office. We go in, coffee, tea, what would you guys like? I've got some cookies and cake, you know, whatever you'd like, you know, all this, just like we'd come to visit her. You know, it was like this was a personal visit of friends. And we got talking, and we figured we'll just let her talk. I mean, she's the one in charge. She knows why we're there. And she's going on, "Oh, OKSANA, I am one of your biggest fans." She said, "I watch all of your films." In fact, she said, "One of the things that I do when I'm driven into work every morning," she said, I have a VCR in the back seat where I sit, and I watch your films. I watch everything that you do." And I particularly love this film and that film. Just beautiful work, OKSANA. Oh, you're just my favorite actor. I just love your work so much. And you know, this is right about a time that for about a year and a half, maybe a year, you know, she wasn't getting any more roles. And here's this, you know, we didn't yet know to tell her that, well, you're not going to see her much anymore. But anyway, this conversation goes on and on and on and on. And some woman came in with a huge cart with a bunch of boxes on it. And OKSANA decided, because OKSANA is kind of, she loves to do this. She loves to kind of stir things up. She says to the woman behind the desk, she said, "Oh, those must be John's files. Those, you know, huge boxes, all that stuff." Like, "Oh, OKSANA, if we were going to bring John's files in here, we'd need a couple of trains." And, you know, I mean, well, oh, ha, 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 we're all laughing, and it just, you know, and I'm not even thinking it yet. I just want to get through it. I just want to get through this. I'm not even thinking anything. But when we got it, she finally had the girl come in with the little piece of paper, and she hands me the piece of paper. "Thank you so much. It's been very nice. We'll see you again in 5 years," or whatever it is. And we walked out the door onto the street, and we were silent down the stairs, silent out the door, silent across the street. Got into the car, shut the doors. Yeah, I said, "OKSANA," I said, "that's the last time I'm doing it. This is the last time I'm doing it." I said, we can't do this anymore. I can't do it anymore, and we can't do it.
How many times can you play out a scene in a Václav Havel play?
Yeah. You know, you
in your real life. Yeah.
You begin to realize that this is not a game. In the 90s, it was cute. It was because there was this sense that we were moving away from it. You know, we were moving to a better place. There was a sense of adventure. You know, being called in and talk to the KGB agents and all of this stuff, you know, I found it funny. I found it humorous. I did tell the story, didn't I, about the insurance, OKSANA's car insurance.
Not on record. Not on record. You told all these stories.
We started too fast.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is around 2017 or so, and OKSANA forgot to renew her car insurance. Russia has a wonderful car insurance thing by which you can call the insurance agent out to your place a residence. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to do anything. They come out, they bring out a policy, you hand them the money, they hand you the, the papers you need, and they go off and everybody's happy. Oksana had to have it immediately, like right now, because tomorrow morning she had to leave the house at 8 in the morning to go into Moscow for business. And she has no insurance. And it's just dangerous to drive without insurance in Russia, because if you're stopped and you have no insurance, it's a huge fine and problems, and they can take away your license and everything. So we sat there in front of the front door of our apartment. And I said to Oksana, I said, well, let's go to an ATM. So you don't have insurance, but there's the drive from our apartment over to this ATM 10 minutes away and back is through like the woods. There's nothing out there. There's nothing, no thing and no one. It's just this empty area of land.
This was in a region called Dolgoprudny?
Yeah, this was we had moved out of Moscow at this point.
Yeah.
We'd moved out of Moscow around 2016 to save money. And because we were already planning to leave Russia at some point. And so that's why we did that. And I said, let's go to the ATM. We knew where there was one about 10 minutes away. And we'll just get back here and you can call the guys. They'll come out here tonight and they'll do your insurance and you go to work tomorrow, no problem. And then I laughingly said, as Oksana was getting the keys to her car and putting on our coats, I laughingly said, well, I said, this will be interesting, because it'll be interesting to see if anybody finds us on this little 20-minute trip, 10 minutes that way and 10 minutes back. Will we make this trip without any stories to tell? And we drove there and we got there and we got our money and we headed back. And in the darkest, emptiest place on the whole road, a police car turns on its light behind her and pulls her over. And I go, oh my God. And it's important to know that the only question a police officer ever asks anyone that they stop on the road is, may I see your documents? It is a phrase that is exactly the same every single time they stop somebody. May I see your documents? The may is there to pretend like they're being polite. I implies that they're the one doing the talking. I'm being facetious now, but see your documents are, that's it. That's it. May I see your documents? Oksana rolls down her window and the guy says to her, tell me please, how are you doing with your car insurance? Because we were driving at that moment without car insurance. It had stopped the day before and we were waiting for the insurance agent to come out to our place in about an hour's time. So she did not have insurance. And I mean, that was so obvious. I mean, it was so obvious that what they were saying, they had heard me say to her at the door, it'll be interesting to see if we can make this trip without any problems. I wonder if they're hearing us. And I mean, it was their answer. They were saying, yes, 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 we do hear you. We hear everything you say in your apartment and we know everything about you that's going on. Mm-hmm. And so when she explained to the guy, he goes, okay, well, I'll let you go this time, but don't ever let it happen again.
It's enough to turn any sane person into complete paranoiac, which begs the question, now that you're living in comparative tranquility on the island of Crete, does that paranoia, it's not paranoia because it's real. Does that concern still haunt you? Do you kind of check around just in case? Are the Greek authorities listening, or perhaps are even, Russia has an extremely wide web.
Well,
are they still listening?
I'll say this. It does still worry Oksana. It does not worry me. I am not the least worried that the Greek authorities are in cahoots with the Russian authorities. I simply do not believe that, and I never would, and I never will. I feel entirely and perfectly sheltered here from all of that nonsense. Oksana is less certain. It makes sense. She's Russian. She grew up in Russia. She it makes more sense that she would be concerned. But then there's the situation that until COVID hit, she would go back from time to time to perform, or on rare occasion to do a television something. You know, she'd do have some small role in a film, but most of the time it was theater. And the last time she was there, which was just before COVID hit, would have been March 2020. She was absolutely, she said there were people in the parking lot. She'd look out there and the same people just kind of standing out there, looking up, hanging around, walking around. And then every once in a while, somebody would try to open the door. And her feeling was that at least in any case, they just wanted to scare her, and they succeeded. While she was there, she had taken part in a protest rally. So she felt like that was kind of their answer. You know, we know you were at that protest rally, and now we're going to let you know that we're here. Mm-hmm. And she actually had a plane ticket out in 3 days, and she called me up quite worried, and she said, "John, I've got to get out of here. I've got to get out of here." And I went online and I got her a ticket through 2 countries. She was able to leave that night. She got out of there, and she hasn't been back since, because then COVID hit and it all, you know, everything stopped anyway. So, you know, yeah, it was, you know, they were, I'm kind of a hard person to scare. I find it more interesting than I do find it frightening, until it reaches a point that I get fed up with it. And I want to tie a little bow on the story of the insurance, and then, you know, hearing me say to OKSANA, you know, I wonder if they're going to do anything about this. Because when we got back, standing at the same place near the entrance, the entry door, I said to OKSANA, I said, you know what? I don't expect to have a knock on the door in the middle of the night. And now in Russia, a knock on the door in the middle of the night is a clear reference to the purges in the 1930s, when Stalin's henchmen would go out and they would come at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, knock on the door, kick it down, and take people away to the gulag. Okay, so that's what a knock on the door in the middle of the night in Russia is. Anybody who knows Russia, has ever lived there, knows the history, that's what a knock on the door in the middle of the night. And I said to OKSANA, I said, you know, I do not expect a knock on the door in the middle of it. But if one should ever come, I won't be surprised. You know? And you know what, Stephen? We both looked at each other. And we didn't even say anything, not because we were going to hide it or something. We didn't have to say anything. It was a moment, you know, the light bulb went on. It was like, oh my God, if you're saying stuff like this place is not livable. You know, if you have come to the point where you don't expect to knock on the door, but if one comes, you're not going to be surprised, that is an unlivable situation. You can't, that is not, human life cannot take place in a normal way under that kind of, I'm going to say fear, although for me it wasn't fear, it was just, you know, it was annoying, just brutally
annoyance.
Annoying.
Yeah.
Brutally annoying. And so that was kind of it. We were, as things happened, there was lots of life things that happened, deaths of 2 mothers, and all kinds of things that happened. These kind of, they came one after the other. Shortly after that, and when it became possible for us to leave, we up and we left. And I will never go back again. I have no desire to go back there. My relationship to Russian culture and the people there, and the people that I worked with, in and around, has been destroyed forever. I have very little respect left for most of the people that I worked around and with in Russia. The vast majority of them just knuckle under. They just roll under. They don't want to. They don't care. There was that's why Putin can get away with everything he's getting away with, because the intelligentsia, forget the intelligentsia. What intelligentsia? There is no intelligentsia there. There's educated people, there's talented artists, but the vast majority of them, they're more interested in making sure that their career is furthered. If you've ever seen the film Mephisto by Eastland.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, to me, that film is the most important film of the last 80 years. I have not seen a single film made in the world in the last 80 years that speaks to the world that we are living right now better than that. And Klaus Maria Brandauer as the actor that just wants to be an actor. I'm an actor, man. I can't get in that politics stuff, and and at a certain point, it goes from being cute, as it does in Mephisto. It goes from being a kind of a cute, understandable thing to becoming an evil thing.
Yeah.
Because anybody with eyes and ears and brains can see what is going on. And the vast majority of the people, actors, directors, writers, I watch one go off into religion. I watch another go off into alcoholism. I watch another go off into hand wringing. Oh, I can't do anything. What can we do? This is so terrible. I don't know what to do. I have no idea what to do. But they're all ineffectual. There's so few that are, I hate to say it, but it's a fact. There are so few who, like OKSANA, will stand up and say, damn it, that's enough. No more. They just, and now, of course, they can't do that because there's a law that says if you come out and you say the word war, they'll put you in jail for 15 years.
Again, John, you were sending out a kind of yellow flashing light to the United States, to what kind of a country we're going to be in 5 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
So this is really, really important. And thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Stephen.
Next week, we're joined by playwright LADARRION Williams.
If you enjoy Animal Farm, please support us on Patreon.